like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see.
Well, good morning, my friends. Welcome to the fellowship of the Holy Spirit. Thank you. It's so good to be with you all. In our tradition, we basically pursue Christianity as a spiritual path, and so we always go to silence as the very living presence of the Lord. I found a new passage in the Bible supporting this. I can't believe I hadn't seen this before, but it's from Psalms, which says, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him," which is exactly perfect. So, as is our tradition, we take the invocation in our bulletin and we say it together 3 times, softer and softer. And then we sit in that silence, waiting patiently for the Lord for about 4 or 5 minutes. So together, there is only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God the good, omnipotence. There is only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God the good, omnipotence. There is only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God the good, omnipotence. There is only one presence, one power. And as we sit in this presence, this universal power, we claim our status as divine sons and daughters of God. We give honor to the Father on this day. We give thanks. The blessings that He gives to us, the open hearts, the eyes that can see, the ears that can hear and understand. We give thanks that our hearts are open to the living presence of God, that we walk in love, we walk in peace all the days of our life. And let's end this time of silent communion with God by softly praying as Jesus taught us to pray, saying, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, and ever and ever. Amen." Well, happy Father's Day. I read a young boy's description of Father's Day. He said, "Father's Day is just like Mother's Day, only you don't spend as much in the present." Another fellow, who, speaking from his own experience, said that children go through 4 stages. First, they call you Dada, then you call you Daddy, then they call you Dad, then they call you Collect. And actually, the telephone companies report that the busiest day for phone calls in the year is Mother's Day, and the most collect phone calls are made on Father's Day. So you know, I, as a lot of you know, I do a big internet search for almost every sermon. I just sort of like go around and see what's going on. Of course, it's rich with Father's Day material. And but it's very funny because on Mother's Day, you get warnings like this from other preachers. They say, Mother's Day is not in the Bible at all, but woe to the preacher who doesn't give a sermon about mothers on Mother's Day. On Father's Day, you get a lot of that, but you also get serious cautions. They say, be very careful if all you do is extol and laud fatherhood, because some of the people out there will not have had good father experiences, when they're growing up. And they say it's actually a day, it's just a small segment, but they say it's as much a day of healing a relationship as it is a day of honoring a father. So I ended up pulling a story out of the Bible about the Bible's worst father, according to some. He's really a great father, but it's very interesting how it's obvious how important fathers are, but in the search you keep finding all these sort of stories about what is it that fathers do. And they end up being very charming. They throw the children up in the air and they pay the bills and all this and all this. It's all very good, but there is this almost confusion about it. Of course, roles are changing nowadays. But I saw a couple weeks back one of these Animal Planet. I don't know if it's Animal Planet. One of these animal shows on television about the elephants in Kenya. So they had an excess of elephants on one reserve. So one of the rangers had this sort of reasonable enough idea that said, let's take a bunch of these younger elephants and move them over to this other reserve, because they didn't have enough elephants over there. Didn't have any, really. So they moved a bunch of juveniles over, really small, like small orphan-type elephants. And what happened is that after a few years, the young male elephants, adolescent elephants, went wild. Particularly, they started attacking the white rhinoceroses, for no reason. Elephants just don't bother with rhinoceroses normally. But they started picking up, stumps with their trunks and throwing them at the white rhinos, and then chasing them for hours and trampling them to death. They'd actually killed 10 of these very rare white rhinoceroses. When the rangers finally said, we've got to do something, they started killing the really violent young elephants. And they killed 5 of them. And, of course, everyone's heart was being torn open by this, because they were there because they love these animals. One of them had the idea. They said, let's bring in some old male elephants, some bull elephants, and see if they can calm them down. And it was exactly like that. That they found out, and they did all this research on it. The older male elephants came in there, and the younger ones just quieted down immediately. And it wasn't that they sat there and they used their bigger bulk and strength and experience to outfight them. It didn't happen that way at all. They found that they put out this chemical that just calmed down these younger male elephants. And the younger male elephants started following around trying to learn how to be a righteous elephant, let's put it that way. So it's a very, looking at our own culture where literally half of the children grow up without a father. Okay, there's split families. It's not that they don't have a father; it's just that they're not living there. So, it's something that I don't have an immediate answer for, but just that we need to put our attention and allow that to evolve into the perfect state that it should be. Father's Day started in really 1909. A woman was listening to a Mother's Day sermon, and her mother had died when she was young, so she wanted to honor her father, so she started, the Father's Day program. But Mother's Day became official in 1914, and it wasn't until 1972 that Father's Day became official. And it's really, in all this, you really get this flavor of everyone loving the mothers, and fathers are nice to have too. So it's just, but we really, really a critical part to society continuing. So who can guess when I say, there are some people who would claim one character in the Bible is the worst father, and others will say no, no, no. Any guesses?
Abraham.
who was, first of all, willing to sacrifice Isaac. And I'll read you the second story. So the background on this is that Sarah can't give Abraham a son. So the culture in that day was, you take the servant of Sarah, Hagar, I think is her name. Yeah, Hagar. And, she goes to Abraham, impregnate Hagar, and the tradition is, Sarah sat there with her legs open, put Hagar between her legs, and Hagar gave birth, and it's considered to be Sarah's offspring. Okay? So that's the tradition. It's very widely honored and accepted, and so, that's exactly where it went. But here's where, the second big indictment about Abraham goes on. Let me just read the passage here. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And I think Sarah was about 80 or something like that. So she was very, very old. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. The child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. And she said to Abraham, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that slave woman will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. Now she's talking about Ishmael, who was Abraham's son. Okay? Right, so, Sarah is just being jealous and fearful. The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. But God said to him, do not be so distressed about the boy and your maidservant. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the maidservant into a nation also, because he is your offspring. Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulder and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered into the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down nearby, about a bowshot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. And as she sat there nearby, she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got him a wife from Egypt. And it goes on, and Ishmael becomes the father of 12 princes of all the Arab tribes. He's a father of the Arab nation. And in the Muslim tradition, and it's very interesting when you sort of read the Bible, because you could read this a number of different ways, but in the Muslim tradition, it is Ishmael who was offered in sacrifice, and not Isaac, because Ishmael was the older son. And as you read this, it looks like Ishmael gets kicked out of there right when Isaac is weaned. There's a great feast when they're going to celebrate the weaning, which is probably 2 or 3 years old. I don't know exactly what it would be. And suddenly, Ishmael's out of there. And so,
could you clarify something? When you describe the birth process with Hagar taking Sarah's place in actually giving birth to this child, are both of those children Hagar's? Is Isaac Hagar's?
No.
I thought that's what you said.
No. Sarah had this promise from God that she would bear a child. Or the 3 visitors come to visit that are really angels in disguise, come to visit Abraham, and they tell her she's going to have a child. And she's very old already, so she laughs at them. That's why they talk about laughter in there.
Okay.
So she laughs at them.
She gave birth
to a child at, say, age 80.
But Hagar was kind of the backup?
Well, Hagar was first. I was describing the birth of Ishmael.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 2 different children. Okay, so Hagar gave birth to Ishmael first, and Ishmael, by all accounts, was loved.
But both of them were Abraham's sons.
Both of them were Abraham's sons. But one was by Sarah, one was by Hagar. And so the jealousy forced him out, and of course, there he is. So by some accounts, you would say, what a terrible father, because he doesn't even really argue with God. He doesn't say, God, how can you do this to my son? But on the other hand, he's a great father. And the reason he's a great father, one is just the obvious. The world would look at him and say, he's a father of two nations. Okay? And secondly, that he's a great father because he listens to God. And the whole point I would make about this is, we become great when we listen to that silent voice inside of us that says, do this, do that, go here, go there. And no matter, it sounds crazy, it looks crazy, but that's where it is. And you will find, if you read biographies a lot or you study very successful people, you will find all of them, I won't say all of them, but a huge majority of them, always at some point in their life sort of buck the trend, buck what they're supposed to be doing, listening to this voice inside and just say, no, I'm going this direction. And a whole new field of life opens up for the world. So that's the lesson I would pull out of this for all of us, is follow that, trust that. Will you make mistakes? Probably. Can you correct them? Of course you can. Just trust and go. Last week I was joking about money, and I said, gosh, if I had $200 million, I could save the world. And I ran into a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who says, money often costs too much. And so I wanted to just set the record straight, because the tendency is to just think vast sums of money are going to do things for us. And I found this sort of heart-wrenching story about a man from West Virginia, Jack Whitaker, who won I think one of the largest lotteries, $315 million. And of course, this is a true Beverly Hills hillbilly, only they stayed in West Virginia. And he took it all. It was after taxes and all that sort of thing. He got $118 million. And, immediately was flooded with requests for money. And he got like 50,000 letters. And he gave away $50 million, which you should think would be a wonderful thing. And it was. But after about $50 million, he said, this is crazy. I'm not doing it anymore. Okay? And what happened was, everybody started suing him instead. So, just frivolous suits, just trying to get money out of him. He had I think it was 800 lawsuits, in the space of a year. Just, of course, all of his friends left, and he started carousing and drinking and going to strip clubs and propositioning young strippers, and his wife of 44 years threw him out. And the only, all of his friends left him, so he was alone and sort of bitter. The only light of his life was his 17-year-old granddaughter. His name is Brandy. And he bought her 4 cars and gave her an allowance of $2,000 a week. This is some poor West Virginia girl. And, of course, goes into drugs. So right away her boyfriend dies of an overdose. And a year later, she dies. So there's a very old story about 2 paddleboat streamers. This is, the 1800s, going up and down the Mississippi. And they both start off at the same time, and the 2 crews start shouting at each other, shouting taunts about who's going to win. They get very, very competitive. And they start racing. So one of the boats pulls ahead. It's a lighter boat. The other boat, they get really angry about this. And the problem is that they have enough coal for navigating. They go down this channel and they go on this channel, but they don't have enough coal to fuel their steam engines to just go for an all-out race down the river. You know, there's no reason to. The current carries them down the river, going from Memphis down to New Orleans. So one of the crew members who doesn't like to lose gets this bright idea of taking some of the cargo, which is a lot of wood products, throwing it in there. And they start throwing the cargo, I guess it's furniture, into the and they start winning. And they keep going, and they finally win, but they get down to the destination, and the whole purpose of the trip has been lost. You know, their whole cargo has been lost. And this is one of the stories I found about raising children. You know, when the purpose is not, you know, to keep up with the Joneses. The purpose is to connect to God. The purpose is to have children that get this connection to the spiritual life, that they might find some peace and some meaning in their life, rather than just getting down to New Orleans first. One of the passages where we see this, where we see Jesus focusing on what's most important, is after the Sermon on the Mount. It says, you know, after he'd given all this talk, Jesus dismissed the crowd. This is in Matthew 14. Jesus dismissed the crowd. So get this picture. Jesus is standing there. There are 5,000 to 10,000 people, depending on how you want to be counting this. 5,000 to 10,000 people who have seen all these miracles, who have listened to his teachings, who are really an army, you know, waiting to be led. And instead of doing anything like that, Jesus dismisses the crowd. And why does he do that? The Bible tells us he goes up to the mountain to pray. So Jesus is, again, the same thing, connecting to God, listening to God, rather than worldly success. There's a analogy about gunpowder that I just found this week. Gunpowder, there's about the same amount of gunpowder in a firecracker as there is in a rifle shell. The difference is that a firecracker, all the power is just diffused in every direction. Rifle shell, all focused out the gun barrel. And that's what gives it all of its power, its ability to do work, to get anything done. And that's where we want to be with our spiritual work. Just focused. It's the same amount of power. This means you've got the same amount of energy going into our thinking, the same amount of emotions coming up. And do we just dissipate them? Do we focus them? You know, this past week, I found myself thinking about a very old incident in my life, one that I thought I had given up long ago. You know, I occasionally sort of just go through and think about old events and try and release or forgive everybody involved. In fact, a great experience is to go through your address book. Find everybody in your address book and just, you will be shocked at how much energy you have on all these people. Just shocked. And you think they're your friends because they're in your address book. And you think, how could I be harboring these thoughts, these feelings? Well, I was doing this with a friend named Dee from probably almost 20 years ago. And this incident came up, and this momentary, just absolute rage came over me. You know, and then it just disappeared. Kind of like, whew, I thought, where is that coming from? Where is that coming from? Because I thought, you know, I'd forgiven him a long, long time ago. I thought he'd betrayed me. You know, of course, that's my perspective. From his perspective, he was doing the right thing. You know, that's how it always is. But I was just wondering, how could this be? How could this still be that sense of outrage? And I just sort of went into a very quiet space, and I just asked, how could this be? And this thought floats up out of the silence. The thought was, I love enemies.
What did you say?
I love enemies. It was such a shocking thought. But I realized, I do. I love having enemies. I love having people I can sort of like combat with, and I hear you all laughing and shaking your head no, but I tell you, find it within yourself. Not just necessary, loving enemies, but you'll find that the very things you think you hate, there is another part of you that loves having that in your life. It's a hard teaching, but it's always there. Yes?
Part of it is that we love the battle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Why I love enemies is because I love the battle. Okay? Now, and listen, there are people, I've met many of them, and I know you've seen them, whose whole marriage is about who has the most power. Okay? You think marriages are based on love, and these marriages are, and the kinder aspect of them, just sort of fun jockeying for influence inside the relationship. Some of them are absolutely argue and fight every day. Okay? And you go, and some of them go on for 20, 30 years. And they just keep on going. You go, well, it's because they love the fight. They love their enemies. Obviously, smoother to have a relationship based on love, where the competition becomes who can love the most rather than who can have the most influence. But in every area of our life where you find the energy coming up unexpectedly or incidents coming up, you go, where is this from? I just encourage you to look inside. You will find this. And then you get to love it, because that's the way through it. Love yourself for having this tendency. Love yourself and let it go. This reminds me of an experience I had back in the early 90s. This is when the first war in Iraq, Desert Storm. I'd gone down to Unity Village, Unity Church, the main Unity Church down in Kansas City, and went to a conference on, how do we eliminate war from the planet forever, that kind of a conference. And, at the time, Saddam Hussein, well, even still, was really the vile character. Everybody just hated him. All these Iraqis had come into Kuwait, and they'd raped so many of the Kuwaiti girls who could never get married, and there's all these stories have been spread around. So, public enemy number one. We all love to hate Saddam Hussein. Sort of like Nurse Ratched. You all remember Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? When she got her Academy Award, she said, "I love being the one you all hate to love." Love to hate. And we do. We all love to hate Nurse Ratched. I mean, that's what I'm talking about here. There's a part of us that loves that. Anyway, so I'm down there at this conference, and of course the premise of Unity Church is God is good, God is everything, and everything is good. That's how we claim it. So there's probably 400, 500 people at this conference. I raise my hand, and I stand up and say, how come if God is good, and everything is God, we're condemning this war? Just stirring up trouble. And of course, they duck the question. There's no good theological answer to that question. And I'm dissatisfied. So I sit down and I close my eyes, not intentionally, I'm just dissatisfied. I just close my eyes, and I just tell you, I was taken to a celestial temple. It's this incredibly gorgeous 40, 60 feet high ceilings, alabaster, shining, shimmering walls. There's a incredible cosmic being up at the front, and thousands of souls in the temple. And this cosmic being is up there saying, who will take birth and become a doctor or a school teacher or a farmer or this or this? And everyone's saying, oh, I'll do this. And all these souls are being, taking on their next incarnation. And it's going on. There's plenty of people volunteering for everything. And then this archangel, whatever this being is, says, and who will be the next Saddam Hussein? And there is dead silence. It was like almost an unearthly silence. And after this long, uncomfortable pause, one soul stands up and says, I will do this. And the place erupts into applause. Just that anyone would be willing to volunteer to be the most hated person on earth. But it had to be someone. And then the vision disappears. And you really get, I got a very different sense of the role of everyone.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Every time you talk to us about our feelings about George Bush, we've been over this the past couple of years. I try, and I swear I cannot get it. I think I just don't.
Yeah.
Because somebody stood up and said, I will be that.
Right.
I was going to say, did you check out the source of that dream?
I just tell you, it was so crystal clear to me that it was no dream. Yes.
I heard something like similar to that, like a story. And then the added ending was the person that said he would do it. He says, please don't forget who I am.
Oh, that's very sweet. That's very sweet.
He's going to take on this bad role, but please don't forget who I am.
Huh. That's very sweet.
So.
Yeah. I haven't heard that. I'd love to actually hear that story. I'll see how close it is to my experience. But
Which is someone, again, having to volunteer to, who's going to do this really bad thing.
Yeah.
Or it's like maybe somebody was saying, I think that in the story it goes, I really want to learn forgiveness, and all that. And so his best friend up there goes, I'm willing to do that for you. I will go down with you, and I'll be the person that's going to really inspire you
to learn how to forgive.
to forget.
Yeah.
But please
To
don't
forget who I am. So, what does all this have to do with these floods that are going on?
Yeah.
My hometown.
Cedar Rapids? Yeah. So, some people are already blaming. I have a friend who lives along the Des Moines River, and he says, that's 20 miles from here or something like that. And he actually one of my employees. And every day, he's had to take the week off more or less to pack up everything out of his house and move it, because when they had a flood like this in 1983, and this is a bigger flood, it was 6 weeks of flooding before they could get back in. And so he's saying, for weeks, this river, you could almost walk across it. You could see sandbars or you could see gravel bars and all this sort of thing. He says they were holding water up in these dams for Memorial Day and July 4th weekend, for the recreation. So he's blaming the Army Corps of Engineers. And they're just saying they went by the manual. Other people, we're going to go through a whole list of blames here, okay? Other people will say, we've been devastating our environment for decades, and this is just nature's way of reacting and balancing. Some will say, we've turned from God as a society, and we're being punished. And all of these have the basic law of cause and effect as their premise. As we reap, as we sow, so shall we reap. But where I'd go with all of this, why I connected in with the idea of forgiveness, is that the deeper law here is the one Jesus taught. It's this law of compassion, this law of forgiveness, of mercy, more powerful than this law of karma. It functions at a very, very deeper level. Everything I've read, east and west, says that 90% of our karma can be transmuted by our spiritual practice. And mostly that means letting go, forgiving. And we cleanse out the impressions in our subconscious mind so we don't draw these experiences into us.
Is there a destiny?
Well, let me go a little bit further here, because I'll tell. And again, these are Eastern and Western traditions that I've studied that have said this. And I'll tell some of the Charlie Lutz stories. Charlie Lutz says, it's your destiny to be shot, and you start meditating and transmuting basically these impressions, and suddenly you're still going to be shot, but the bullet's going to whiz right by your ear instead of hitting you. It's that kind of a thing. We're all born with a certain destiny. We're born here in America or New Zealand or wherever we're born. We're born male, we're born female, we're born with the parents that we have. So certain parts of our destiny are just given. And inside of that, there's this road we walk that's really set by those boundaries. We weren't born in Laos. We weren't born in Burma, so we're not going to have those experiences. But the more we let go, the more free we are. And I'd extend this out a little bit because, back to this idea of, I kept thinking, where did this thought come from about Dee, from 20 years ago, this burst of outrage. And because in the back of my mind is, I think, we should become so perfect that these things never come up. They're so eliminated. As God, as I think Paul says in Hebrews, that God has forgotten your sins. And I'm sure there are things that I used to bug me and just never come up anymore. But I realized that it's not quite like that stuff never comes up when we're totally pure inside. Because what happens is we expand. I was at a men's weekend once. And, in most men's weekends, you'll find some sort of grief experience. Everyone just grieves the loss of their comrades or their brothers or their fathers or this or that. And, I've never been to war. And, personally at that time, my father was still alive, and I knew very few people who had died. I've mentioned a couple of times, I've had a very, very easy life on many levels. But when it came time to grieving, I tapped into this field of universal grief. I just couldn't believe it, how much grief just poured out for what was, in my life at least, just totally, completely inappropriate. And what I get from that is, no matter where we are, as we expand our awareness, that we start allowing universal energies to come up for us to really master. And that the process is of mastery, of how we react to these energies rather than just never having them and suppressing them and fighting them. But we've gone long enough. What I'd like to do, let's just close our eyes a little bit. And let's go into two areas. So just sit easily and take a breath, relax. Let's allow our attention to move into our hearts. And as we're in this place of love within our being, just for a moment feel some love. Feel some appreciation, some gratitude. And if you would allow a memory of your father to come into your life now, good or bad, and just allow your father to be there and say and feel, Father, I love you. And just let go of any judgment. Let go of any sense of loss. Just let it go. And allow yourself to remember who your Father truly is. At his core being. Who is your Father? But a spark of God. A soul, just as we are souls. Feel again the love, the gratitude, the appreciation for all the good he may have done, for all the not so good that he may have done. Just love him for it. Love him and let it go. And then let's expand out a bit and allow our awareness to encompass this wonderful state we live in. And with your attention still in your heart, bring to your mind, your mind's eye, any images of the flooding you may have seen on TV or in the newspapers. And feel whatever you feel when you see those images. Feel it. Love those feelings and let them go. And now imagine our own home being flooded, everything being lost. All our precious photos, our furniture, our cars, everything being lost. Then move back into your heart and feel how okay we can be with this happening. How we can trust in the wisdom, the mercy, the goodness of God, of life. Because from this level of beingness, of presence, are we not always okay? And then let us collectively, with one mind, with common thought, pray for the balance of nature, that the floods might subside, that homes might be restored, that people's lives somehow be blessed by this upheaval, that their lives might resurrect into the fullness of the presence of God. And bring back your attention now into your heart. Let it move back down through the body, down through the legs. Let it rest in the soles of our feet, that we may be grounded on this planet. With our heart in the heavens and our feet on the earth, let us move forward into our lives. Amen.